This video is about tench fishing, and it's aimed at beginners like myself. So, forgive me if I keep looking down, because I've got a crib here, just so that I don't forget anything. For more years than I care to remember, I've been in pursuit of barbel, with a little trout fishing in the coarse fishing close season. And many anglers spend their time pinning over bridges like I was yesterday. See what I mean? Or turn to commercial carp fisheries, sitting in rows of platforms. Well, you can go fishing on the canals, of course. None of it appeals to me, really. But whatever floats your boat, as they say. I've often considered fishing for tench, sitting by a small, lily-covered pond on a nice early summer's morning, as the sun's rising and birds beginning to sing. The prospect of catching a tench has a certain appeal to it. Knowing nothing about it, and I mean nothing, I've scoured the web, looking at dozens of videos. I've looked at countless articles on the web, and I've also read several books about tench fishing by, I suppose, specialist anglers. So as part of this venture into tench fishing, obviously you've got to look at all the sources of information, most of which is on videos. But I've got 3 tench books here which I've been reading. This first one is from the BK Successful Angling series by Jim Gibbinson, and it was published in 1990. So it's interesting to look at what they were doing 30 years ago, or more than 30 years. And there's a list of the contents. It's amazing just how much it has changed in those 30 years. For example, in there it says, for 90% of my tench fishing I use Mitchell 410As. This is the second of them, Red Eye. It has 25 chapters. Each chapter is written by a different tench angler. But essentially it's about their ventures on the bank. Usually a day out angling and what they caught. It's an interesting read, but there's very little in it about tackle. There's probably more in it about bait, but much of it is taken up with photographs of middle-aged blokes holding up big tench. But it's an interesting read for all of that. And the third book is published by Coarse Angling Today. This is Tench, a handbook of techniques, and it was published in 2009, so it's relatively up to date, albeit 14 years ago. Again, each chapter in here is written by one of these specialist tench anglers. You see the headings for the various chapters there. Many of them are sponsored by tackle manufacturers. I mean, the tackle manufacturers figure quite prominently in these videos. But any tackle manufacturer you see on this video is there purely by accident. It's the gear I've used is what I've had for years and years and years, and I've just raked it all out. The one thing which has come out of this is that there are almost as many methods of fishing with tench as there are anglers doing the fishing. So this video attempts to condense the common threads running through all the sources which I've been researching for what seems several weeks. I'll take a look at 4 things. Obviously, waters where tench are likely to be found, when to go, tackle and setups for tench fishing, and baits. So where do you find tench? Most tench fishing is done on large gravel pits, mainly in the south of England. And most of the information available on the sources I've been looking at, the videos, the books and the articles, is about tench fishing on these. In the north, which is where I am, they tend to be found in former brick ponds where clay had been extracted for manufacturing bricks, or they're found in old country estate lakes with a big house. Gravel pits tend to have hard, sort of stony bottoms with a little bit of silt on, whereas brick ponds and estate ponds tend to be knee deep in mud or silt. So there's a big difference. Now, when to go? Tench are more fussy than most fish about temperature, and they do prefer warm conditions. From reading, nigh on impossible to catch when the water is cold. And in the south, tench fishing tends to begin at the end of March, beginning of April, and it continues right through until the end of September. But the height of the tench fishing season is May and June, and the water warms up, but the weeds haven't started developing yet. Being coarse fish, they tend to spawn in the late spring and early summer, and this is when sort of specialist tench anglers set out to catch the biggest fish, the hen fish, which contain lots of eggs before they spawn. In the north, tench fishing tends to begin about a month later, but the best time is from mid-May until mid-July. And as the sun rises higher in the sky and the waters become warmer, then weed becomes a problem, especially in shallow fisheries with lots of plant nutrients. And apart from dedicated tench anglers, most anglers then return to the carp fisheries or rivers. The coarse season having opened, we all go back to fishing for barbel or chub. What about tackle for tench fishing? Well, hours of video and acres of print are dedicated solely to this. Much of it sponsored by manufacturers whose gear features prominently in these sources. But there are common trends which I'll look at now. Depending on the fishery, tench can reach £10 or more. But realistically, a good tench would be about £6. Now, as tench prefer to loiter amongst the weeds, especially the strong tangle of lily stems, only venturing out to feed close to this sort of fortress to which they rapidly retreat if they're disturbed or caught, then you need strong tackle. When it comes to rods, an 11 or 12 foot 1.75 test curve rod would cover most situations. But if you're fishing really weedy swims, then a 2 pound test curve rod wouldn't be out of the ordinary to extract a hooked fish from a mass of weeds, which you often see on these videos. And then we come to reels. Well, very real minefield. all I would say, having looked at all of these sources, is that a reel with a bait runner is recommended. In fact, I would suggest it's essential. And one which takes sort of 10, 12 pound line. What about line? Well, this was where there was much variation in opinion. The advice varies from £6 to £15. I mean, I suppose it depends on the venue, whether it's a sort of weedless open swim or a great tangle of lily pads everywhere, or maybe somewhere where you're likely to catch a big carp. But something between £8 and £10 was the recommended strength. And a very contentious issue: should it be braid or monofilament? Well, monofilament definitely got the vote. There was some opinion that braid, having no stretch and being thinner than mono, pound for pound, it was better at cutting through lily stems with tough weed should a hooked fish find its way among it. But I've never been a fan of braid, I must admit, except for pike fishing. Well, having dealt with the main line, what about hook lengths? As tench are easily spooked by anything suspicious, soft fluorocarbon was the choice of most people. And obviously the strength depended on the venue, the size of the fish, and what you were going to have to do with these fish should they find their way into a tangle of weed. But £10 fluorocarbon was the most common hook length used by the experts I was reading. The other thing I noticed about them, they were very short. I mean, sometimes as short as 3 inches, but certainly less than a foot, which for a barbel fisherman on rivers seems extremely short, but there we are. Well, the last bit of tackle is that bit you've got on the end, the hook. Strong hooks are the order of the day. Similar hooks to the ones you use for carp fishing and barbel fishing. And the sizes varied from 8 to 16, but 12 to 14 seemed to be the most popular choice. The other thing about hooks is most of them seem to use hooks which have been hair rigged. And the next little bit of video shows how I tie my hair rigs. I don't suppose they're any different to the hair rigs you tie when you're fishing for barbel. So let's just go and have a look at that, see how I do it. When I've been fishing, one of the things I've noticed is that the slightest resistance that a fish feels when it's picking up the bait immediately makes it suspicious. And having been reading about tench, it would seem that they're probably the most suspicious of all the fish. So when it comes to tying hair rigs with a little stop, this is how I do it, and I think it reduces the resistance to almost nil, at least. That's what I hope. Anyway, I'll show you in 2 different colours so you can see it easily on a big hook. So these are the little stops. You buy them in 4 different colours. I've used all the brown ones up. They come in 2 different sizes. These are small, whereas these are bigger. bit more substantial. And at the time I'm using fine braid, which has next to no resistance. It's very flexible, unlike mono and fluoro. The first thing to do is to thread the braid through the stop. And then just break it off. And then determine how long you want your hair. You can have 3 pieces of sweet corn on there, obviously it has to be a lot longer. Or if you put in 3 or 4 pieces of worm on there, again it wants to be quite long. Anyway, we'll settle for that. And then just wind that around. Keep it tight. It's just about finished. And cut off the bits you don't want. And that's it. Just give it a dab of varnish. And you just take one of these needles and poke it through whatever bit you're going to use. In this case, 10mm dynamite halibut pellet. And you can see just how flexible that is. No resistance at all till it gets the hook. So, there you have it. And there they are for comparison. That's a size 7 that. I use that for barbel fishing. It's not the neatest of wrapping, but it will do for the purposes of this video. Well, I've looked at all the tackle that you need. Let's go and have a look at how you put it all together. The setups. This is a veritable minefield. Not only are there several setups, but each of these experts or contributors, they seem to have their own sort of personal tweaks to each of these setups. But for this video I'm just going to ignore that. I've selected 5 of them in no specific order of popularity, and I'm going to present them without the various tweaks. The first one is a simple sliding ledger rig, which most people will be familiar with. The second one is the lift method setup. The third one is the heli rig or helicopter rig. The fourth one is the boat rig. And the fifth one, which is probably the most popular of all, is the inline method feeder rig. So let's go and have a look at how these things are tied. Well, this is the first of them. It's just a simple sliding ledger. This is a 10-pound main line, a little bead there, and a snap link. And attached to it is this little block end feeder. It just leads down to an exercise 8 swivel, a little knot protector on there, and this hook length, which I've probably got far too long, but it doesn't matter. This is £10 fluorocarbon, and on the end a really strong hook. I think this is a barbell specialist hook with a hair. That's a rig that most people will be familiar with. And there are 4 different feeders which you can use with it. This black cap block end feeder, this block end feeder, little cage feeder. They all come in different sizes. And this is a what they call a combi feeder. You can take the ends off this and just use it like a cage feeder, which you can see there. This is the rig used for the lift method, which you can look up on the internet. I can't explain it on here. This is the main line, and then there's a couple of float stops and this float adapter. And the main line goes straight through to the hook. Now, to sink the hook, you can put shot on the line, but of course that's likely to damage the line. So here, just a little tiny swivel with these 2 float stops, and a piece of mono here onto which are pinched pieces of shot. And the amount of shot you put on there depends very much on the size of the float. Of course, when it comes to the float, you need a long thin antenna on the top, but this is the only one I've got which fits that bill, but there are hundreds of others. It's absolutely mesmerising. Anyway, just have a look at 1 or 2 bits in close detail. So these are these float attachments. This is a silicon, and this has a little ring on it, and there's a little hole in here, and the line goes through there, or in this case the line goes through that little ring, and the float fits in the top. So when you want to change the float, it simply pulls out, and you put slot another one in without having to break down the whole rig to do it. And these little float stops, they come in all sorts of different sizes. And for beginners like me, all new to this, I'll show you how to fit these things onto the line later. Yeah. In the lift method, is fish about 6 inches over depth, and you fish overweight, so these weights here more than counterbalance the float. If you look up the method, you'll realise why. And you can do it just by, you could do it just by nipping pieces of shot onto the line, but of course that might damage the line, and you might suffer a break off. So there were 2 things quite interesting. In this one, you just put a little tiny swivel on there for these 2 float stops, so you can move it up and down, and a piece of mono on there, and just nip these onto the monos, as many as are required, and that doesn't damage the line. For another suggestion was to use these olivettes inline, olivette things, a little piece of tubing through the middle, so they thread onto the line here, and you put a stop below them so they don't slide all the way down to the hook. And again, that doesn't damage the line either. So take your pick. So this is the third one I looked at. This is the so-called heli rig or helicopter rig. So this is the main line, and at the end of this you've got a feeder. It's just a flatbed block end feeder, but you could use a combi feeder on here. A little swivel. I've just covered that with a sleeve. Less chance of a tangle. But this is the crucial bit here. Let's just have a closer look at that. So here you have a float stop, a bead, this little clip which I'll look at more closely, another bead, another float stop, and on this little clip is this piece of tubing which is important, and a short hook length. This is probably far too long, but they fish this with really short hook lengths, about sometimes as short as about 4 inches. So here you see this little clip, and the hook length has a loop in it, tied with a non-slip figure of 8 knot, which is really difficult to tie, I found. And this is useful in that you can, if you want to change your hook length, you just quite simply take it off and put another one on. And then this little rubber tube here, little rubber sleeve, covers the whole lot up. And the reason it's called a helicopter rig is because this thing here spins round on the line like a helicopter. The other big advantage of this is, of course, that all the weight is right at the front when you're casting. This is a medium block end feeder. You get bigger than this. I think it's about, that's 50 grams. This is a huge block end feeder if you want to hurl it a million miles. But 60 grams seems to be the mass which is mentioned more often. There were differing opinions about how long this hook length should be, but the most common one was that it shouldn't reach down as far as the feeder. So this one's moving up. So this one's moving up the line, or the hook length wants to be a lot shorter. And the advantage of this rig is that this piece of tubing here holds hook length away from the main line, so you're less likely to get tangles. This thing, which is number 4 on the list, is called a bolt rig. The main line, this is an inline block end feeder. So the main line comes down through there, goes through a little tube, comes out at that end, and there's a swivel. And then this hook length here. And this pulls into a little hole there. Yeah, and again, it's normally fished with a really short hook length, 3 or 4 inches. And the reason it's called a bolt rig is that when the fish picks up the bait, and bolts off, the weight of this thing causes the fish to hook itself. This final one is probably the most popular. And this is called a method feeder, this thing. And it comes with a mould which you can use to load it with bait. So it's an in-line. The main line comes down through there, through this little tube, into this connector, which I'll look at. And you fish this with a really short hook length. Again, it's got a loop tied with this figure of 8 knot. But inside here is one of these little connectors that comes with it. And just have a closer look at that. And they come in different sizes and different weights. This is quite small. I think they're sometimes known as banjo feeders, but most people call them method feeders. So let's just have a look at this little connector in here. So there you can see there are two parts to it. This inner bit and this sleeve which sort of slides over the thing. And two little sort of hook bits, one at either end. And the loop of the hook length fits over one side, and the loop on the end of the main line fits over the other side. So you can very quickly change the hook length, or you can in fact change the method feeder. And there you can see it in action. This is the loop for the hook length. This is the loop for the main line. And when you pull the main line, this thing slots in there. And it's quite a tight fit. There it is. So that's all 5 setups which I've come across in this research into how to fish for tench. They also seem to be used for fishing for carp, albeit much bigger versions. When I come to stitch all this video together, the maximum this program will allow is 4 gigs. When you get to 4 gigs, it stops the video and starts a new one. Now, as we have reached just about 4 gigs, this is probably a good time to finish video 1. So hopefully I'll see you when I continue with this on part 2, when I'll look at baits and how to proceed on the bank, what these experts tell us about it. Join me then.